I am making a deck profile for my branded Regenesis deck. I got first place at my locals and won a box of Alliance Insight. And I was actually kind of surprised how it worked, mainly because I saw barely any Regenesis, but the thought was there. I figured why not make a deck profile and see if anyone has any ideas of how to improve it. As I will always read comments. If there are any ideas, I will usually try out the ideas. Starting off with the monsters, I play 3 copies of Despian Tragedy. Tragedy has the effect that if it is sent to the graveyard or banished by card effect, then you can add any Despian monster from your deck to your hand except for another copy of Tragedy. And then it also has the effect while it's in the graveyard that you can banish it to set a branded spell or trap from your graveyard. However, you can only use one of those two effects. You can only use one of those two effects per turn, and only once that turn. So use the effect to search. You can't use the grave effect to set. And next, I play 2 copies of Tri-Brigade and Recarrier. Recarrier has the effect that if you control a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Alabaz material, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can send this card to the graveyard to negate that effect and destroy that monster. As I believe it negates and destroys. Okay, no, it just negates it, doesn't destroy. And it has the effect that if it's banished, you can add a Fallen of Alabaz or a monster that mentions it from your deck to your hand. Or the deck or graveyard, because it could be both. Let's see. Yep, you add from your deck to your hand. That effect didn't come up at all while in the tournament, so I couldn't actually remember. And then next, play 1 copy Guiding Quem the Virtuous. Quem has the effect that it's always treated as a Dogmatica and Despia monster. And then when it's normal or special summoned, you can send a Fallen of Alabaz from your deck to the graveyard. And then if a monster leaves the extra deck, then you can add one, you can special summon a Fallen of Alabaz from your graveyard. As a quick effect. And then next I also play 1 copy of Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous. Blazing Cartesia can be special summoned from your hand while you have Fallen of Alabaz on your field or in your graveyard. And then Blazing Cartesia has the quick effect of being able to fusion summon using monsters from your hand or field. I believe there is a restriction, it has to be level 8 or lower. Nope, it has to be a level 8 or higher fusion monster. And then the final effect is during the end phase, if this card's in the graveyard, and a fusion monster was sent to the graveyard that turn, then during the end phase you can return it from your graveyard to your hand. And then next I play 3 copies, Albert the Jester of Despia. And then just like Tragedy, Albert has 2 effects where you can only use one of the 2 per turn, and only one of those 2 can be used each turn. When Albert is normal or special summoned, you can add a branded spell or trap from your deck to your hand. And then if a fusion monster leaves your field while Albert is in your graveyard, you can target one monster your opponent controls, special summon Albert, and then if you do special summon Albert, you negate that targeted monster's effects until the end of the turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Fallen of Alabaz. Fallen of Alabaz has the effect that when it's summoned, you can discard a card to then fuse it with any other monster on the field. Which for the longest time, I randomly thought Alabaz had to fuse with an opponent's monster. Turns out it's just any one other monster on the field. And then all you have to do is discard a card for that. And then, can't remember if Alabaz has another effect. I feel like it doesn't. Okay, never mind. I was correct. I don't. Okay, discard what I just said. It does have the effect that you cannot use your own monsters as material. That's what it does have that effect, and you can only use that effect to Fallen of Alabaz once per turn. Next, I play 1 copy of Ad Libitum of Despia. Ad Libitum has the effect that if it's banished or sent to the graveyard as fusion material, then you can target one level 8 or higher, or is it level 8 or lower? I can never remember if it's level 8 or higher, level 8 or lower, because some are higher, others are lower. Okay. It lets you target a level 8 or higher fusion monster or Despia monster that is banished or in your graveyard and special summon it. That's what its effect was. And that's it for the branded part of the deck. For the Regenesis part, I play 1 copy of Regenesis Warrior. All of the Regenesis monsters, except for Archfiend, share the effect that if you control a monster that has 2500 original attack or defense, then you can special summon it from your hand. And then during the end phase, they all have the effect that if they're in your graveyard because they were sent there that turn during your opponent's end phase, then you can return them from your graveyard to your hand. And then Warrior has the quick effect of being able to tribute itself to target one, can never remember its card or monster. You target a monster your opponent controls, return to the hand. It's just a walking compulse. Now I play 1 copy of Regenesis Dragon. Dragon is basically just a cosmic cyclone that can tribute itself, target a spell or trap your opponent controls, and banish it. Now I play 1 copy of Regenesis Sage. Sage is an Omni Negate by sending one other Regenesis card from your hand or face up field to the graveyard. And then next I play 3 copies of Regenesis Archfiend. Regenesis Archfiend has the effect that you can reveal a monster that has 2500 original attack or defense in your hand, special on this card from your hand. And then if Archfiend is normal or special summoned, you can add a Regenesis card from your deck to your hand. And then the standard Regenesis, if returned to the hand during the opponent's end phase, if it was sent to the graveyard that turn. And then lastly, for the monsters, I play 3 copies of Molcharmi Fualos, just because it is the best of the Molcharmis. As you can only use 2 Molcharmi effects per turn. During the end phase, if you have more cards in your hand than your opponent controls plus 6, then you randomly shuffle cards from your hand into the deck until the cards in your hand are only 6 more than the cards your opponent controls. So if you use its effect twice and your opponent ends their turn with only 3 or 4 cards on field and you have 14 cards in your hand, then if it's 4 cards they have on field, then you have to randomly shuffle 4 of those cards back into the deck. And then Fualos just lets you draw a card whenever your opponent would summon from deck or extra deck. And next for the spells, I play 1 copy Branded Fusion, 1 Theater of the Branded, and 1 Branded Lost. Branded Lost makes it so your opponent cannot activate the activation or effects of cards or effects that include the effective fusion summon. And then your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when a fusion monster is summoned, which just makes it so that if you make a chain and the last part of that chain is a fusion monster that has an effect when summoned, then your opponent just can't activate cards or effects in response. And then it has the last effect of it is if you fusion summon a monster, you can add a Fallen of Alabaz or a monster that mentions it from your deck to your hand. You can only use that effect of Branded Lost once per turn. Then Theater of the Branded as a once per turn polymerization. That then if a fairy monster leaves your field, then you special summon a level 8 or higher fusion monster from your graveyard. And then Branded Fusion just lets you fusion summon using 2 monsters from your deck as material, including a Fallen of Albaz. However, you are then locked into fusion monsters for that turn, I believe. Let's see. You can also special summon monsters from the extra decks over fusion monsters to turn you active this card. Okay. Which that lock isn't that bad in at least this version because the entire extra deck is fusion monsters. And then next, I play 2 copies of Branded in Red. Branded in Red lets you target a Despia or Fallen with Albaz that's in your graveyard, add to your hand, and then you have the optional effect of being able to banish from your hand or field to then fusion summon a monster. And you can only activate 1 Branded in Red per turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Regenesis Code. Regenesis Code is a bit tricky to use in this deck, just because it lets you summon a Regenesis monster from your deck. However, it's sent to the graveyard during your opponent's end phase. But it also locks you out of your extra deck until the end of the next turn. But you can't... So usually if I'm using this, I will make a board. Then I'll activate... Regenesis code, summon something like Archfiend to grab Sage and then summon Sage, just so that there's an Omni Negate. But I actually did lose a game because of Regenesis code locking me out of the extra deck. So I couldn't just summon fusion monsters, so this card is a little trickier to use, but it also has the great effect of during the main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard except for the turn it was sent there, to then be able to summon one of your Genesis monsters that is banished. You can only use one Regenesis code. You can only use each effect of Regenesis code once per turn. Next, I play 3 copies of Regenesis. Regenesis lets you add a Regenesis monster from deck to hand, and then outside of the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish it to summon a Regenesis monster from your graveyard. And you only use each effect of Regenesis once per turn. And lastly, I play 3 copies of Branded Opening. Branded Opening has the effect that you can discard 1 card, and if you do, special summon a Despia or Fallen of Alabaz monster from your deck in defense position. The thing I like about this card the most is the fact that the effect, when you activate it, you do not discard for cost, so if this gets ashed, you don't discard anything. And then it has another effect where if this card's in your graveyard, and your fusion monster or monsters will be destroyed by card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. And you can only use each effect of Branded Opening once per turn. And then for the traps, I play 2 copies of Regenesis Birth. Regenesis Birth has the effect where it has 2 effects where you can send a Regenesis monster from your deck to the graveyard. Or is it a Regenesis card? I can never remember. Okay. You send a Regenesis monster to target one monster your opponent controls and switch it to face down defense mode. So its first effect is Book of Moon. And then it has another effect where you can, during your opponent's turn, you can send it to the graveyard to be able to summon as many different Regenesis monsters from your hand, graveyard, or banish as possible with different names. So if your opponent is able to break your board or they're about to get rid of this and you haven't used the Book of Moon effect, you can just chain this, send it to your grave for cost, to then be able to just summon a bunch of Regenesis monsters. The only downside is that that grave effect can be hit by Ghost Ogre, or not Ghost Ogre, Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. That's what it is. So your opponent's randomly playing that, they could potentially have a Ghost Bell to stop that, but most people don't use Bell, at least at my locals. And you only use one of those 2 effects per turn and only once that turn. So if you use the effect on your opponent's turn, so use the effect to Book of Moon monster, you cannot send it. Then lastly, I play 3 copies of my favorite trap card in this deck, which is 3 copies of Branded Banishment. Branded Banishment has the effect that you can target a Despia or level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and then you have the optional effect of being able to banish from either side of the field to fusion summon. And you can only get 1 Branded Banishment per turn. I do remember one thing I actually used to do with this deck that I felt like was really evil. Was against one of my friends at the locals, where if I was playing Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, I would make that and then give my opponent the Ito the Supreme Magical Force, which just prevents your opponent from summoning. I'll give it to them in defense mode. And then I will summon... I summoned 3 Masquerade the Blazing Dragons. So every time they activate a card or effect, they have to pay 1,800 life points. And then the last thing I did was I somehow found a way to make Light and Darkness Dragon Lord. So they had Ito the Supreme Magical Force in defense mode, where they can't change his battle position, because I believe Ito's effect prevents them from changing battle position. So they can't summon monsters. The first 3 cards they play are negated, and they have to pay 1,800 life points per card. Which means they only get 1 effect after the first 3 negations. Which, luckily, I don't have Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, just because I feel like that was too evil, so I traded it to one of my friends who was wanting it for Branded Blue Eyes. And then, anyway, for the extra deck, I apologize for going off on that little tangent. I play 3 copies of Albion the Branded Dragon. Albion the Branded Dragon has the effect that if it's fusion summoned, then you can banish monsters from your hand, field, or graveyard to fusion summon a level 8 or lower, I believe. Yeah, level 8 or lower fusion monster. And then during the end phase, if this card was sent to the graveyard that turn, you can add to your hand or set a branded spell or trap from your deck. And I believe Albion is a hard once per turn. Yeah, you can only use each effect of Albion the Branded Dragon once per turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, I feel like, is one of my favorite branded monsters. Just because of it being really easy to summon in the deck, and it make it so your opponent has to pay 600 life points to activate cards and effects. And then it has the grave effect. If this card's in your graveyard, your opponent controls a fusion, synchro, Xyz, or link monster, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it leaves the field. And the other thing is that for this card to have your opponent has to pay 600 to activate cards or effect. It must be fusion summoned. So if you summon it back from the graveyard with its effect, it doesn't make your opponent pay 6. Then next, I play 1 copy of Rindbrum, the Striking Dragon. I hardly ever summon Rindbrum, but I do like having it as an option. Where it has the effect that when a fusion, synchro, Xyz, or link monster effect is activated, then as a quick effect, the Rindbrum has the effect that when your opponent activates a fusion, synchro, Xyz, or link monster's effect, then you can negate that effect, and then you can return 1 monster from the field to the hand. Then during your opponent's turn, while its card's in the graveyard, as a quick effect, you can target a Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard, special summon either that monster or this card, and then banish the other. And you can use each effect of Rindbrum, the Striking Dragon, once per turn. Next, I play 1 copy of Titaniclad. Titaniclad is really only in here to be sent to the graveyard for its grave effect of during the end phase being able to summon a Fallen of Albaz or Dogmatica monster from your deck. Next, I play 1 copy of Alba Lunatus. This is in here for 2 purposes, where you can contact fuse it by using a Fallen of Albaz that's on your field and any number of dragons on the field. It can attack monsters your opponent controls up to the number of materials used to summon it, and then during the end phase, it lets you add a normal polymerization or fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. Or is it just deck? This might be the one though. Okay, I just add from deck to hand. And next, I play 1 copy of Granguinol the Dusk Dragon. Granguinol has the effect that when it's summoned, you can send a level 6 or higher light or dark monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard. And then I don't remember the rest of this. And then the monster is special summoned by an opponent's activated monster effect. Except during the damage step, you can banish the card from your field or graveyard to special summon a Dogmatica monster from your deck or a Despia monster from your extra deck. So, usually, if I use that, then this will summon Guiding Quem from deck or Despian Proskinian from the extra deck. Because, unfortunately, I wasn't playing Despian Lulu Lilith, nor was I playing Despian Proskinian. Which Proskinian was in the deck originally, but I decided to replace it with something else last minute, which I'll say what that is when we get to it. And then Despian Quertus has the effect that during the main phase quick effect, you can activate its effect to change the attack of all monsters on the field to 0, except for fusion monsters that are level 8 or higher. And then it also has the effect that if it is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, then you can special summon a Despia monster from your deck. And you can only use each effect of Despian Quertus once per turn. Next, I play 1 copy of Lubellion the Searing Dragon. Lubellion has the effect that you can, when it's summoned, you can discard a card for cost, to then be able to fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster by using monsters from your field, grave, or banish, by shuffling them back into the deck. And then if you use this effect, then Lubellion cannot attack that turn, but usually it's shuffling itself back with Fallen of Albaz. And then next I play 2 copies of Mirror Jade the Iceblade Dragon. Mirror Jade, originally I was only playing 1 Mirror Jade, but I decided to play 2 instead of Despian Proskinian. But I actually had a time where I could have summoned Proskinian, which was off of the Grand Gwynol, the Dust Dragon. But Mirror Jade has the effect that once per turn, as a quick effect, you can send one Fallen of Alabast fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard for cost, to non-target banish a monster from the field. You can only use that effect of Mirror Jade once every other turn, so if you use it on your turn, you have to wait till your next turn in order to use it again. Or, it's not that effect of mentioning its name, its effect reads, you can only use this effect once every other turn. So if you use its effect, banish itself, and then you can banish ad libitum, then you can bring this back and you can use it again. Mirror Jade also has two other effects. One that makes you can only control one Mirror Jade, which I feel like was done because at the time this card was released, Mirror Jade would have just been absolutely banned if you could have multiples, and it wasn't it was a once per copy effect. But Mirror Jade's other effect is if this card leaves the field because of an opponent's card, except for being returned to the extra deck, then you can activate Mirror Jade's effect to then be able to, during the end phase of that turn, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. And then lastly, for the extra deck, I play one copy of Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera has the effect that when it's fusion, it acquires 3 monsters, at least one on your field and one in your hand, with different names. When it's fusion summoned, you can activate its effect to then make it so that you destroy cards on your opponent's field up to the number of monsters from your field you used, and they can draw a card for every monster in your hand you used. And that's it for the extra deck. Moving on to the side deck. For the side deck, I play one copy of Regenesis Warrior, because sometimes having more access to more compulses is actually a pretty good thing. Next, I play 2 more copies of Regenesis Dragon, just because it's stable against Blue Eyes. You can use this to banish an opponent's True Light. And then it's just a pretty decent Cosmic Cycle and doesn't require you to pay 1,000 life points first. The next, I side 3 copies of Moltarmi Perulia, just because Perulia is not good against every deck, like Fual, or it's good against a lot less decks than Fualos is. But Perulia does the same thing as Fualos, but you only get to draw when your opponent summons from hand. Next, for back row hate, I play 1 copy of Harpy's Feather Duster and 2 copies of Lightning Storm. Lightning Storm actually has a dual purpose in this deck, as you can banish, or if you have no face-up cards on your field, or is it no cards in general? Okay, if you have no face-up cards, you can activate its effect to either destroy all attack position monsters your opponent controls, or all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. You can only activate 1 Lightning Storm per turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Dragon's Mind. Dragon's Mind, even if I take the Regenesis cards out, I'll probably end up maining Dragon's Mind, as it is just an Omni Negate while I control a monster that's original attack or defense is 2,500. Which every fusion monster in this deck, with an exception to, I believe it was Guardian Chimera. Yeah. Outside Guardian Chimera, every fusion monster has 2,500 attack or defense. Some of them even have 2,500 attack and defense. But the other effect of Dragon's Mind is, while it's in the graveyard, you can pay 2,500 life points to reset it, but its banishment leaves the field, I believe. Yep. And you can only use each effect of Dragon's Mind once per turn. And then the last card I play on my side is 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier. Dimensional Barrier can be, or when activated, lets you declare Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, Pendulum, or Ritual. And then for the rest of the turn, the declared monster type cannot be summoned, nor can it activate its effects. That is it for the deck I played that got first place at my locals. If you have any ideas what I can do to improve the deck, any ideas for decks like to see made in the future, or decks like to see face each other, comment down below. I always read the comments. Thank you for watching.